पहले इस जमीन के अनुपजाऊ होने के कारण मैं बिल्कुल बेरोजगार था। एक दिन हमारे गांव में वाटर शेड प्रोग्राम की डीपीएपी हरियाली प्रोजेक्ट
कर दिया है
और योजनाबद्ध तरीके से जल का संरक्षण कर हमारी सूखी जमीनों तक पहुंचाया गया। और अब देखिए, मैं एक फलते फूलते बागीचे का मालिक हूँ।
निर्जन में जीवन उपजाओ, भूमि संसाधन विभाग, ग्रामीण विकास मंत्रालय, भारत सरकार।
Namaskar and welcome to this edition of Public Forum. I'm Shalini Verma. Well, sugar, and keeping in mind the situation that we have in our country regarding the production and the consumption of sugar, it is for sure that in days to come we'll have to import sugar, and that is now official. Now, India is the biggest consumer of sugar, and keeping in mind the drought hit situation in major parts of the country, it is going to be one major concern for our people and for the government in this festive season. In this edition of Public Forum, we'll discuss the availability of sugar as well as the other food stock in our country, and not only that, the import policy, the entire trade policy, as well as the steps taken by the government in this regard in this edition of Public Forum. And to discuss more on this, we are joined by three distinguished panelists. We are joined by Dr. Upendra, who is a senior fellow with the Research and Information System for Developing Countries. So welcome to the program. We're joined by Gargi Parsai, who is the deputy editor with The Hindu, and Dr. Ramesh, who is an agriculture economist. He's a national professor with National Tech for Agriculture Economy and Policy. Welcome to the program. And before going into the discussion, let's take a look at this short report which will tell us more about this grave problem.
India is the largest sugar consumer in the world and the second largest producer of sugar. In the last 2 years, the country exported 6 million tons of sugar after bumper harvests. However, things are a little different this year. The worsening agricultural crisis has led to a chronic short supply of sugar canes, and sugar prices have shot up like never before. In the retail market, prices are reported to have reached at rupees 35 to 40 a kilogram from about rupees 16 to 17 a kilogram a year ago. Analysts are of the opinion that the steep decline in the output, however, is not a problem that has been created by single year's shortfall in cane output. It's the result of a continuous decline in sugarcane production during the last 2 years after scaling a peak in 2006-2007. The blame for this lies mainly on the policy regime for sugarcane and sugar, which has become very complex over the years. Demands have been coming up from various quarters time and again for addressing these issues, but the fact that the government failed to avert this situation implies that concerns of this sector remain to be given adequate attention. For now, with the festive season picking up, the biggest worry of consumers is कुछ मीठा कैसे हो जाए? चारू कार्तिकेय's report, Lok Sabha TV.
Right, the world's biggest sugar consumer and the second biggest producer of sugar, India is now worried, and in fact people in India are worried that how can we ensure meetha ho jaye in this season when we notice low sugar stocks. Prices have already reached between 35 to 40 a kg, which were earlier 16 to 17 rupees a kg just almost a year ago. It's going to be a bitter pill, but I'll come to you, Gargi, in this. Are we ready to take this pill?
Nobody is ever ready to pay higher than what they think should be the cost of a product or a commodity. And sugar prices, as you rightly said, have more than doubled in the last 1 year. The reasons for this are many. Yeah. Number one, of course, is that there has been lower sowing of sugar cane, and there has been a shift of farmers from sugarcane. There has been a diversion from sugarcane to other crops like soya bean, other cash crops, soya bean and wheat prices. Wheat and rice prices had been raised in the last 2 years, so some of the farmers have shifted to that. Along with this is the problem of farmers not getting paid in time, and the sugarcane arrears 2 3 years ago were into thousands of crores.
Right.
So naturally, if you don't get paid for your produce, if you don't get paid immediately for your produce, then you are bound to shift to other produce where you can get the money.
Right.
So these are some of the
Various
causes.
reasons due
Plus,
to
there
why.
are international causes also because there has been a shortfall in sugarcane in the world.
There is an interesting aspect as you talk about the international causes. We'll talk about all these factors one by one, but let me quote Agriculture Minister Sharad Pawar here. He said, increasing the price of sugar is not only due to the shortage of sugar, but also because of the ever increasing international prices of sugar. I would like to come to you here, Dr. Das. Oil, all the while, when the oil prices were increasing, we attributed it to the international oil prices. Now here we are, the second biggest producer of sugar. And what really strikes me at this point of time, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong, that how can we not play an important role among those international players when we are the producers? Why is it that we are not counted into the international, why is it that we are not the international player this time? And why is it that we are depending on the international rates, keeping in mind we being the second biggest producer?
Yes, that is because the trade integration, both on the front of imports as well as exports of sugar of India with the global market, is not substantive enough to actually determine global prices. On the other hand, Brazil's shift of sugar cane to produce biofuel has actually created a shortage in the global supply.
European Union.
Yes, and also European Union. So the prices are actually set by those who are more integrated in the global market. Actually, we are quite a lot self-reliant as far as sugar is concerned.
We are a little self-reliant in that case, which is why we can't be those big global players. But looking at the global prices here, as well as the mechanism that has been adopted by various other countries also, it is a stark reality that not only us, but also the European Union, who have to import a lot of it, and the onus in that case would lie much on Brazil. But looking at the circumstances, sir, how do you see us reaching that target, which has been set by the ISO also in this regard?
In fact, there are more than one factors which have brought the present kind of situation. Of course, international price situation is very important factor. If we look at sugar prices internationally between the first quarter of this year and now, you just find that they have increased more than 60%.
Yeah.
So that certainly is a factor, and it's not that those prices have increased solely with this expectation that India is going to buy sugar. Though India's decision to import always influences international price, but international prices have increased on its own also. Now the question which you raised in the beginning, that what are those factors? I think the basic and fundamental factor in the case of sugar is, and this factor is relevant to most of the agriculture commodities, that there are production cycle, there are corresponding price cycle. The sugar is notorious for both production cycle as well as price cycle. If we look at the international situation of sugar prices, they were at peak in 2006. So most of the time during 2006, sugar prices were quite high. And at that time, India's farmers also allocated more area under sugar. So from nearly 4.2 million hectare, we increased to 5.2 million hectare, a 20% increase
In the area.
in the area under sugarcane.
Yeah.
And since international prices were very high, and other country also followed the suit. But around 2008, you just find that when after 2007, the global economic crisis came, the prices of petroleum products, crude, went down significantly. So the incentive to divert cane from sugar to ethanol also declines. So then in late 2007 and 8, we faced a situation when sugar prices came down.
So how serious is it an indicator of inflation in general?
Um, that depends upon a country, that what is the weightage of the consumption expenditure on sugar. So if in a country that weight is high, so its influence on inflation would also be high.
What is it in our case?
I do not remember the exact figure,
Yeah.
but as you said that India is the largest consumer,
Yeah.
here there are again two dimensions, that we are largest consumer for two reasons. One is that because of population, that we come next to China. And then if you look at our per capita consumption of sweetener, it's not at the top in the world, but we comes among the top.
There is an
consuming
important
countries.
factor here, Gagi, if I come to you. Price, most of it in our country, as has been said several times by various analysts, that it is quite artificial in nature. It happens because of hoarding. More of it is artificially created. Do you attribute the same things around sugar price also this time? No?
It is also a contributory factor, I would say. Recently, one of the states has come down on hoarders, and they have taken out sugar, which was being hoarded. So, and the government, if you have noticed in the past few weeks, the central government has really been cracking the whip, so to say, on state governments to work on hoarders. But the most important thing, recently the of Food has taken one action, is that they have imposed stock holding limits on bulk consumers, which are they say that 60% of the consumption is by bulk consumers, which means the manufacturers of cold drinks and ice creams and confectioneries and all those things. So that order is to come into effect from 12th of September. It has not yet come into effect. Under that, they can only keep stocks up to 15 days, and I believe that that is going to work, on the sugar prices, because when that order comes effective, the prices it will have some effect on the prices, because more sugar would be available in the market.
I agree with madam that the basic reason is imbalance in demand and supply. But this hoarding and that kind of factor, they aggravate the situation.
Absolutely.
So when you just find that scarcity is building, then there is a very strong incentive to go for this
And
kind
there
of
should
thing.
be political will to come down on hoarders.
Yes.
And
This is
somehow
where-
is lacking, in most of the things.
There are lots of lacunae that way when it comes to demand and supply and dealing with those middlemen factor. Coming to you, Dr. Das, are we really obsessed as, if you talk about a consumer, the biggest consumer of sugar, I would like you to tell us, how do you see Indian society being really so obsessed with the consumption of sugar? I mean, we can always talk about it when we talk about other countries. It's very important to deal with the consumer in our country.
No, I mean, in economics, when we study the theories of demand and supply, I mean, what we study is that about consumers' tastes and preferences, and there is no denying the fact that not only India but the entire Indian subcontinent has sweet tooth, and it's been part of our existence, our food habits,
Cultural
and,
background.
Cultural
There
background.
is a cultural background
Yes,
behind it.
and perhaps I mean, the kind of ethos that we have, sweet is very auspicious. I mean, even you offer to gods and goddesses. So I think it is consumption, definitely, as Dr. Chand mentioned, is because of the huge population that we have. That also because of the specific region, specific consumer tastes and preferences. It's part of our culture.
Yeah. It is certainly a part of our culture, but when it comes to ensuring food security to all, we also saw that the government decided to supply 2 kg of sugar to people living below poverty line, especially in this month of September itself. They wanted to begin with it, and we have seen Maharashtra Chief Minister Ashok Chavan also already announcing 20 rupees kg sugar in his own state. Certainly assembly polls, we are looking ahead, we're looking forward to those assembly polls, but it is likely to have some good and some big political effects also in this term.
There is a lot of things going on behind the scene for this, in the sense that yes, Maharashtra government has decided to give 5 essential commodities at a fixed price. They buy from the market and then they are giving it to consumers. And of course, it is related to elections in Maharashtra. There is no doubt about it. But there was a move in the government. There is still a thinking in the government to replicate that model in the center, at the center. That is to say that government is providing sugar as of now only to below poverty line populations. There is a move to provide sugar to above poverty line population during the festival months of October and November for Diwali and for Dussehra and Diwali. In October, for Diwali,
Right.
to give them 2 kilograms of above sugar at a higher rate. Below poverty line as of now is getting at rupees 1350.
Okay.
Now the proposal is to give the above poverty line at about rupees 22 per kg, for which they are trying to negotiate with the sugar industry. Believe the sugar industry has agreed to give 20% of their production as levy. As of now, they give only 10% as levy to the government for distribution under the public distribution system.
Right.
The government believes that if they can give sugar to above poverty line at rupees 22 a
Right,
kg, then
right.
that may become the benchmark. But it's
Certainly.
not likely to be.
It's not likely to be,
the
certainly.
benchmark. Open market rates are not in a hurry coming down from rupees 35 a kg.
Absolutely. So that's going to be one big constraint when the government also has extended a hand towards the industries to help them provide that support to the common people under the PDS. But let's see how it turns up in days to come. Well, it's time here to slip into a very short break, but after the break, we'll continue the discussion in public forum. Welcome back to Public Forum. Well, in Public Forum today we are discussing the existing sugar stocks in our country as well as the way to deal with it, because import of sugar is now a light-cold situation. Right, and before going to the break, we were talking about how exactly our country has responded to the entire situation that we're facing today and how exactly the government is looking up to it. But if I come to you, Dr. Ramesh Chand here, the ISO has estimated that India's production is likely to go up to 20.75 million tons and Brazil's production to 36.85 million tons in 2010. And as per the estimate, it seems that this is going to be one big target which India may not be able to achieve. Looking at the existing circumstances when production in our country, agriculture in our country is completely dependent on monsoons, how do you think we'll be able to achieve this target?
First of all, even if we achieve this target, we would be having shortage of nearly 3 million ton. Our demand this year is, by government it is admitted that it is 22.5 million ton. And a year after this, since it increased annually by 2%, so we can expect that it would be crossing 23 million ton. So even if we reach the ISO figure, we would be short in sugar to the extent of say 15% or 3 million ton. Now coming to whether we would be able to achieve this ISO figure, I have my doubt. I have my doubt because of two reasons. One is that if we look at the advanced estimate for area, they indicate that the area that is put under sugarcane this year is 1.5 lakh hectare less than what it was in year 2008-9. So a reduction of about 20%. So that is the reduction in the area. Then the second worry is that because of drought, though sugar is sugar cane is cultivated mainly under irrigated condition, but there is so much stress on water sources that the experts are expressing fear that we may not be able to have the kind of yield that would be required to achieve the target of 5 million tons.
Please, sir, as you were talking about the increase in area factor, what I read somewhere was that the increase in sugarcane production has basically been a result of increase in area under cane rather than an increase in productivity. What does that talk about our complete policy? What does it say about the policy?
I would say that this not increase in production, I would say fluctuation in production of sugar last about 10, 12 years. They are mainly because of fluctuation in area, because productivity is sort of stagnant during last 10 years. And we can tide over this crisis only if we get some success, the kind of success which we got in the case of cotton, that for 4-5 years we were stuck with cotton, then suddenly BT variety came, which was resistant to insects and some insects and pests, and there was a more than doubling of production of this cotton. But so I feel that if we get some success in technology of sugarcane of that type, only then we can think of long-term growth in supply, keeping pace with the growth rate in demand.
There is an important thing here, sir. I would like to come to you here, Dr. Das. While we talk about the sugar policies in West, and while we just compare it with what we have here in our country, there is a three-tier system. It's generally the farmer, and there you have the sugar mills and the consumer. But we believe in walking through a line between helping the farmers and consumers. Whereas when it comes to West and their policies, it's generally to bolster the income of the factory owners as well as the farmers. Do you think that happens to be one big lacuna in our policy when we deal with the production and the consumption angle?
Yes, I mean to an extent you are definitely correct. But I would like to steer this whole discussion to a more long-term solution, because if we identify both the internal and external factors, the structural factors, the political factors, all associated with this, I think it's only then that we would be able to counter the cyclical trends that we witness, both in prices and production. And though Dr. Chan has mentioned about the biotechnology related advancements, I think in sugar we have tried already, correct me if I'm wrong, disease or pest resistant crops, high yielding varieties. But in my view, and I do not know, in my view, I think soil science, the whole soil management, that has been one area which has acted as a constraint on productivity. And we need to actually focus on productivity, at the same time address some of the structural weaknesses. For instance, she was mentioning about the accumulation of arrears, and that deters farmers to sow the crops next year. They go to other cash crops or more remunerative crops. I think there is some vicious circle which has got established in this sector, which is part of a larger, food policy or the agriculture policy, where we wanted to help the underprivileged, but at the same, I think it is not actually doing that. And perhaps this is again to reiterate that we need a step green revolution, and sugar would be a part of that.
Gargi, if I come to you on this.
On this issue, there are, you are right, the government has to balance between what the farmer gets, what the industry wants, and at what price the consumers are getting sugar. Now, when you talk of what the farmer gets, now today the price of sugar in the retail market is 35 rupees a kg. And the farmer's price set by the center is about 107 per quintal. The other day, there were farmer groups that came to Delhi and they were protesting about the crisis in the farm sector because of drought and other reasons. And Mahendra Singh Tikayat of Bharatiya Kisan Union, he made a point. He said, ki, you are getting sugar you are selling at 35, and what is the farmer getting? So, there is that issue. The second issue is that the government sets one price, remunerative price to be given to the farmer, the minimum price to be given to the farmer. And the state governments have in the past, we have seen for whatever reasons, for whether wanting to help farmers or whether for political reasons, have been giving a higher price. Sugar mills have always contested that. They want a uniform price. People have gone to court also, and there is a decision has been taken that there should be a uniform price. But the state governments have not really fallen in line, and whether they should or they should not is another issue. Because farmers are not really getting that kind of a price, for them to be able to not divert from the sugar. The other thing related to this is that farmers, as I said, they get a parchi, when they go with the sugar cane at the, and they get paid a year later. That accumulates arrears. Whereas this time we have seen that there has been a lot of diversion to gur, to jaggery, to gur and to khansil. Gur, they are getting a better price. If you are giving 107, maybe they are getting 200 or 250 per quintal, and they are going to the gur walas. And that gur, as it has come to light just now, that 50% of the sugar cane has gone to the gur walas for illicit liquor, in other states.
This is one.
So there are a lot of aberrations. There are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. First of starting from the farmer, whether he is getting the price, and whether you are wanting him to grow more, whether you are giving him those kinds of benefits, whether the sugar industry is really not exploiting the farmers. The sugar industry has a problem of controls. Their area is said, they are given licenses, their free sale quota is announced, they have to give for levy. So they are really struggling for decontrol of the sugar industry, whereby the market rules the price.
So even they face some big problems when it comes to ensuring those benefits.
Because they say our ex-factory price is this. Now today they are saying their ex-factory price is between 30 to 32 rupees. So they say, how can you get sugar in the market?
Dr. Ramesh, here, while we talk about this agricultural policy, sir, do you see that there are some basic defects that we first need to rectify, we need to clear them out, and only then we can move ahead and talk about proper balance between the demand and the supply?
I think things can move simultaneously. As you rightly raised this issue of triangle, that there is a consumer, there is a producer angle, and there is a trade angle.
Right.
Whenever there is an increase in price in the off season, farmer doesn't get benefit out of it, consumer suffer. So it is the trade which benefit from it. So though there are
even they have their own conditions.
So though there are some problems of control and other things, but you just find invariably whenever there is increase in off season, it is the trading class which invariably get benefit out of it. Now if I relate it to policy, that how we can avoid this kind of thing, how we can avoid these swings in prices, that sometimes sugar selling at 50 rupees, sometimes at 35 rupees, how we can avoid it. I think it's a technical thing, and if you permit me, I would like to take 2 minutes on it. You see, we need to have some stability in supply. Unless we have some stability in supply, we will not have stability in price. Now there are two options before any government to have stability in prices, because production fluctuations are there. So how you have stability in supply? Production is fluctuating, but domestic availability, how you maintain or how you moderate instability in the supply. There are two options. One is trade, that you export when prices are low in your country, and you import when prices are high in your country. This is a best strategy in case our production cycle is not positively correlated with price cycle in the international market.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, in the case of sugar, our production cycle and price cycle coincides with international price cycle.
Okay, what is the second factor? We'll talk about the trade factor completely, sir, in a different way. What was the second thing you were talking about?
Second thing, policy is one thing. Then we also have to address this question of natural source management. Water is becoming a very serious constraint.
Okay.
We also have to address technology
I think certainly that leads us to another segment, which would be on the trade policy in our country, and also the harvesting mechanisms that we can definitely use and we can definitely employ in our country to ensure better productivity, better production. Well, it's time here to slip into a very short break. We'll continue the discussion. Stay tuned. Right, in this edition of Public Forum, we are talking about the import of sugar, the grave concern in the government. Right, and if you want to be a part of our panel and if you want to just post me your comments, all that you need to do is dial us, call us on our toll-free numbers, which are 1-800-115313 and 1-800-115314. Well, before going to the break, we were talking about the policy, the trade policy of our country, and as we look at it, I would like to come to you here, Dr. Das. When we compare the trade policies in our country, especially keeping in mind the first point that Dr. Ramesh was also mentioning, importing at a time when the international prices are low, or in fact the domestic prices are high, but exporting at a time when the international prices are high. This has been something which we haven't seen, not only in case of sugar, but when it comes to food grains, when it comes to wheat, when it comes to rice, we have experienced the same situation. And to add to the fear, we have also heard Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee saying that it's better not to announce that you need something or any country requires something, because in that case, considering the fact that a country could be a big importer, international prices itself go high. So looking at this entire thing, do you think that there has been some problem in our trade policy, or is it just natural, normal, to have those international prices playing us too hard with the domestic prices?
See, when a situation of this kind arises, that time the predicament of import policy is not so much on prices, but more on arranging for the domestic availability. Especially when a product or commodity is an essential. Now, sugar being essential, quote unquote, and it was in short supply, we had no other choice but to bridge the gap in our domestic availability through imports. Now, if imports are available at lower prices, I mean, there is no problem. In fact, one should be feeling that imports are providing a cushion. Problem is when imports are actually done at a higher price, right? Now, again, you have no choice, because you have to, you have to decide whether price is more important a consideration or domestic availability. Now, trade policy is determining these two, and sometimes these two factors are such that it is more lucrative to import, and sometimes the global situations actually are adverse. Now, I have seen some reports that despite the fact that government, and in my view, taking a very correct step to allow this duty-free import of sugar, so that at least whatever is in our hands, that component of tariff was not going to contribute to price rise domestically, because in the global market, in any case, the prices were given. This was a very welcome move, but I see reports saying that despite this fact, the importers, the millers and so on, they are actually not willing to import. Now, there is a news saying that in anticipation of this kind of shortage, few months back, they had made some preparedness towards this, and this is something intriguing, and we must probe more. Perhaps Dr. Ramesh Chand may throw light on that, or she can suggest that. Why is it today we are getting a news item that trade policy, which was in the correct direction, imports are available at a lower price, but importers are actually not going to take those imports.
That is good. Let's first take a caller from Delhi. Uttam Singh, would you please put your question or your comment?
Please. As we know that 60% of our population depends on agriculture, then this is quite obvious that increase in prices of food grains, pulses or sugarcane will be equally or even more beneficial for farmers or poor people. Then how far this increase in food prices is good for farmers?
Exactly, the same thing we are talking about right now. Would you like to answer that? That is, he's asking almost the same question.
Yeah,
that why is it that certainly it's generally a three-tier structure as we were talking about in sugar, in case of sugar, but when it comes to paddy, it's farmer and the consumer, and
Yeah.
the government plays a major role in that case. But coming to the same point that we are also talking about, this report that Dr. Das is talking about.
No, there are three things involved in the way the decision was taken, industry to export. Now, in 2006, when earlier on, when we had a production of 26.3 million tons. Yes, last year we had a production of 2,000 to 263 lakh tons. When we had, and the previous year also we had a good production. So at that time, the industry wanted to export, but the government delayed the decision because this happened around the general elections time. Now, sugar industry is very closely linked to politics in our country, and I have no personal evidence, but it is said that the industry is one of the biggest donors for elections. So it is linked very closely to the political scenario, politics, and elections. In the last just before the last general elections, the government made huge releases, in the set up huge free sale quotas for the industry to bring about, to control the prices, which were just then rising. They had become 25 rupees a kg. And at the same time, because the stocks were good, because the production was good, the industry was very keen to export. The prices were good in the international market, they were low, and the industry wanted to export, but the government stopped that. Because of elections again, and they were very keen that the prices shouldn't rise just before elections. By the time the government came to taking the decision that the industry should be allowed to export, government did not want to export on government account because it was a big scandal when it was done long years ago. Right. So when they decided to do that, the prices had risen. Actually, the moment India enters the international market, the prices go up. It's not just in sugar; it's in other commodities also. We are a bulk buyer, so to say, and which is what happened this time also. At the same time, the government had a buffer stock of 50 lakh tons, which it slowly dissolved.
Okay.
So those were the management issues on the part of the government, which many people think that could have caused, could have brought about this decision when we are very depleted in stock.
Well, those could be some reports and some stories that we heard, but let's go to our caller, Professor S.K. Prakash from Chennai. Sir, please put your question.
Yeah.
So we would request you to please lower down the volume of your television set.
Yes, I've been teaching long time economics.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thing is, since we are talking about food insecurity and all this, why can't we have a dedicated land for food production in the future at least? Let's say we demolish unwanted buildings, create good ponds. See, today we are, one of the examples we have in Gujarat. Gujarat is successful in agriculture today. So why can't we emulate this in the future in all the states and have dedicated land? Let it be with the government. And we go for a full-scale production and be self-sufficient in food production, at least in the future. And it is possible. It is not possible. You cannot say it is not possible. It is possible if there is a will, there is a way. And today India is one of the countries in India, the world, which is, today we are talking about.
No, absolutely. We understand your concern, Professor Prakash. Certainly, we understand your concern, Professor Prakash. Thanks very much for that suggestion, rather, but that is also a question from his end. Dr. Ramesh Chand, is it really possible to dedicate that part of land especially for agriculture? It's just the reverse that's happening around. We are moving towards urbanization, more and more buildings.
I think land issue is becoming very, very important, and it is being debated whether we should be allowing says our industry or land that is agriculturally productive. So
But it's not only that.
We are facing this serious
I think
problem.
with that we come to the second concern that you were raising, which is the water harvesting technique in our country to ensure that the proper irrigation is provided to at least the area which is under cultivation, the land area to that extent. Don't you think that that itself needs a proper
There are
revamp?
three ways to increase production. One is, of course, area. But there are limits over area. In most of the thickly populated country like India and China, the scope for area expansion is very, very limited.
Okay.
The other two options which we have and which are quite strong in the case of India, one is that we increase crop intensity. Like we take second crop only on 35% of our total cultivated land.
Right.
It can go up to say 50% or 55%. So that almost amounts to having 25% additional area under cultivation. So this is one source that if we take more than one crop, of course the condition must be met for that, but our crop intensity at present is awfully low. The second source of increase in production is productivity. In fact, if we compare our productivity level with, often we talk about China, so you just find that in most of commodity we are only halfway. And similarly, we also find that it is possible, our experiment shows that we can raise our, say, rice yield by 30% or 50% in different states compared to what it actually is now. So that is the second route to increase in productivity. So if we can harness or exploit any of these two sources, then we can sacrifice some of the area which is needed for infrastructure, industrialization, urbanization.
Exactly. Dr. Das, if I come to you, we generally see this trend in our country, which is, let's say, 2 to 3 years of consecutive years of good production, then we have again 2 years of low production. What would you like to say about this trend? Is it like specific to sugar or other commodities, or it is?
It's generally true of the cash crops, actually, because I mean, I have seen myself the sugar mills and the farmers queuing up, and spending nights to offload, and then waiting for a year to get their payments back. And obviously, this is a major deterrent to continue what they have been doing very successfully. I mean,
Shifting them from one crop to another.
Exactly. I mean, given the same level of productivity, I mean, this crop shifting, if this trend can be arrested and people dedicated to a cash crop and they maintain that cycle, that itself would, solve at least the cyclicality in the production. I mean, this is something. I mean, the payment system, the kind of stress that undergo in terms of taking their crop from the and to the mills. This is a major. I mean, these two things, if we can tackle. Other things, yes, mechanized harvesting and things like that, I mean, to improve productivity.
Certainly. Two major areas where steps need to be taken. So we'll slip into a break, but after the break, we will be talking about the government, the other steps which have been taken by the government and which are required to be taken at this point of time, as our experts also believe. They have just highlighted 2 more steps. We'll be talking about that in detail after this break. Don't go anywhere.
एक शक्ति, एक ताकत, जिसने अन्याय के आगे कभी हार नहीं मानी, जो सदैव सत्य और अहिंसा की राह पर चलता रहा। आज संपूर्ण विश्व जिसके सम्मुख नतमस्तक है, महात्मा गांधी।
Welcome back to Public Forum. Well, sugar cane is grown in India almost in 1 lakh villages. That is 1 out of every 6 village in our country grows sugar cane. But we are certainly the largest consumer of sugar, the second largest producer after Brazil. And today we talk about the import, the likely import of sugar that we are expecting, and not only that, the existing sugar stocks of our country. Right, and as we discuss the various steps that have been taken by the government, especially to make sure that the amount, the stock of sugar is maintained to an extent that is available to meet the domestic demand of our country, import of raw sugar under advanced authorization scheme by sugar mills has been allowed at zero duty, and not only that, the import of sugar at zero duty by sugar mills under open general license was also allowed till August 2009, 1st of August 2009. Looking at that, do you think that government has been able to keep those, especially first of all those steps relating to the import of sugar to an extent that is so that it can meet those domestic demands?
Definitely. I mean, looking
under both these schemes.
That's right. I think both these schemes, the steps taken to allow import of duty-free sugar and the extension from March 2010 to I think December 2011.
It was absolutely duty-free back in 1994, and then
yes.
it increased to almost 60 custom duty back in last year, I believe. Yeah,
that's right. So you see, the customs duty on imports is definitely a function of domestic availability, and I mean this is an issue which has almost held the WTO Doha round talks ransom. So I mean we have to see that this is basically a livelihood issue for farmers. The consumers also, not all consumers who actually consume sugar are affluent consumers, who consume chocolates and things like that. I mean perhaps sugar goes into the staple food of consumers. So it's a commodity which has livelihood implications, both from the point of view of consumers as well as farmers.
Exactly.
And this is just a reflection. I mean, sugar, if you take this crisis, this is just a reflection why Doha round talks, we are stuck on agricultural negotiations. We are not actually trying to compromise in any way the domestic consumer.
Absolutely, because government is certainly liable to those the rights of the farmers. That is also an important concern. We are joined by a caller right now, Mr. C.M. Jetli. Will you please put your question and comment, sir?
नमस्कार।
Yes, Mr. Jetli.
देखिए, जब सरकार शक्कर का इंपोर्ट करती है
जी,
तो उससे क्या है कि शक्कर भाव कम हो जाता है और किसान फिर गन्ने की खेती नहीं करते। मेरे हिसाब से ये शक्कर का जो सरकार के पास अपना स्टॉक पड़ा है वो सामान्य जनता के लिए बेचे, और जो इंडस्ट्रियल यूज करने वाले हैं, कैडबरी, टॉफी, शक्कर चीजें बनाते हैं, कमर्शियल यूज करने वाले, उन लोग को इंपोर्ट करने की परमिशन दे देवे, जिससे कि जो शक्कर का भाव है सरकार अपने कंट्रोल में रखे, सप्लाई कंट्रोल में रखे, और इंपोर्ट का असर शक्कर भाव कम होने पे ना हो और गन्ने की खेती ज्यादा हो। जब खेती ज्यादा होगी तो अगले मौसम में अपने आप शक्कर का भाव कंट्रोल में रहेगा।
Exactly. Thanks very much, Mr. Jetli. How do you look at it, Dr. Ramesh?
In fact, whether a private concern buys from the market or he is allowed to import, it affects availability. So it will not matter much in terms of availability.
But maintaining the stocks, you also mentioned about buffer stocks.
I come to that there are two options for stabilization of prices. One is trade policy, about which I talked.
Exactly.
And we have seen that trade policy is not very beneficial, because when we are exporting, since our cycle matches with international cycle, the prices are very low. And when we are deficient, generally world is also deficient. So our import turns out to be very costly. So if we calculate the difference between what we earn from export and what we pay for import, it turns out to be very, very high. So in this kind of situation, the second option for stabilization is building up of reasonable level of buffer stock. Since in our country we have lot of control over sugar, so we cannot expect private sector to build a buffer stock to take advantage of year-to-year fluctuation in the prices. So the onus then comes on government that as a stabilization measure, other than meeting the annual requirement, etc., that like we have buffer stock of wheat and rice. That is one of the major reasons that prices of rice and wheat remain much more stable compared to prices of other commodities. So we can think of buffer stock in sugar as one of the measures for stabilization of domestic prices rather than using trade and variable levies to stabilize the domestic price. This would not eliminate the cycle in prices, but this would certainly moderate the cycle in prices.
Absolutely. And as we talk about that, how do you look at this, Gargi, that most of the areas, government has also accepted that most of the area which was under sugarcane cultivation, that has grown, that has in fact reduced because of the shift to other crops, wheat and rice in some states. That is going to be one big problem.
Let me first also make a comment on the buffer stock. There was a buffer stock of 5 million tons created in good times. But as you rightly pointed, that there should be a stock probably created by the government. This stock was with the industry. Government was giving them an interest subsidy, and I think some warehousing charges also it was bearing. And now it has been liquidated, you know. So that is, I would agree with him that the government should maybe create a stock so that it has availability of sugar and it should bear the cost. When you create a stock, the most important thing is about the carrying cost. Who will bear that?
Dr. Das also wants to add something.
It's a very good suggestion, but I would just add, instead of treating buffer stock as a substitute for not trading, what we should be doing is that the government should have canalized agencies like STC or whatever to have buffer stock, and for that, even if we are required to import when the prices are actually down in the international market, the government should do that. So I think there is no contradiction between having imports which contributes to buffer stock, because our ultimate objective is to maintain domestic availability so that prices are stabilized.
Also keeping all those things in mind, keeping the international sentiment, international prices in mind, the market sentiment in mind, the demand-supply gap. What else do you think that the government has grounds for? I mean, if it comes to action and bringing out some more measures.
The government has the free sale quota in its hand. The government has been making huge releases, as I mentioned that before the elections last time, they've made huge releases, which are probably not that justified. Again, for the festival season, the government has made huge releases. The government is in talks with the industry for increasing the levy quota from 10% to 20%. Maybe it may not give 2 kg sugar to APL population, above poverty line population, but the government is in talks. The government has already taken the step of
it's a sustainable development of sugarcane based cropping system. That's also a centrally sponsored scheme that has been implemented in some states, which also includes the field demonstration, training of farmers, extension workers, guiding them in fact properly, and making sure that the production also increases.
That also happens. Sugar institutes are there where a lot of research is happening on how to increase productivity. But you have to remember that farming is in the hands of farmers. You cannot force them to grow this crop or that crop.
So that has been happening for a long period of time.
No, you are not forcing them. You are not forcing. You cannot say if a farmer wants to shift from sugarcane, you cannot stop him from saying that no, you will have to go for sugar.
Isn't it completely the market that governs the entire?
It is the market that governs the entire thing. Certainly it's the market, but I am saying that you cannot really force a farmer that you don't diversify. If he wants to go to soya bean or if he wants to go for wheat because he is not getting good price in sugar, he'll shift. But of course, the government has to give intensive incentives. The government has to take steps to see that the farmer is getting right price for his produce. If he's not getting, we have suicides also of farmers.
Exactly. So times are going to be a little tougher, especially in times of drought, the festive season, and looking ahead at the entire political situation, that will also be certainly be seeing some impact of this rise.
Yeah, it is most likely. It is most likely. And I would say that we need to look at question of food in an integrated manner. The situation at present is, since time is less, that our food demand is growing something between 2.5 to 3%. But if we look at growth rate in overall food, in most of the year it is falling short of that. So what we do is that we follow one ad hoc approach, that we have a problem in wheat, we come out with food security mission, we give some incentive for wheat. So we find that we have solved problem of wheat, that problem arises in the case of sugar. So then we address problem of the sugar, give some incentive, take some corrective measure. The problem arises at other commodities.
You'll be talking.
So I feel that the issue of food should be addressed in an integrated manner.
And who knows, with the short paddy cultivation this kharif, who knows, next season you'll be talking about the shortfall in paddy production and what rice production and
God
what we
forbid,
need
we really don't want that. Nobody wants it.
There is an estimate of 10 million
Exactly.
shortage in rice.
Yeah, exactly. But looking at that, this mission to ensure food to all, to provide these basic things, including, as you were also talking about, sugar being taken as a staple food in our country. People certainly, when they take it, they do not know how many calories do they have. We are the people who have the maximum number of diabetic patients in our country, and we are the, repeatedly as I'm saying, that we are the biggest consumer also that way. But still, towards that mission of food security to all, how would you like to?
Yes, I mean that is fun, but I'm not that pessimistic as my other colleagues. I mean, as I mentioned right in the beginning, that the steps that the government has taken, and the very fact that people are, in New York Stock Exchange, I mean the commodity exchange, the prices, the stocks of, sugar index went down, and there are no takers. People are not importing. That means there is already some safeguard which is there, and also in the same report I find that already this recent spate of monsoon is going to benefit the crop which is already there. So I think on the balance, I don't think it is going to be such a severe problem, and we should not look at imports as a taboo, but as a cushioning factor.
Absolutely. But there are certain reforms that need to be introduced in every other factor, whether it comes to the agriculture policy or the trade policy. Just to end up the entire thing, let me quote one important statistic which says that the sugar consumption of India, it has reached almost 233 lakh tons in 2008 and 9, the season October to September, from 218 lakh tons in the previous year, according to the official data. So
population has also grown.
Absolutely, and so has the consumption. So the import is essential, but meetha is something which everybody wants, and especially in this festive season, that's all we can expect. Well, thanks very much for joining us. It was certainly a pleasure having all of you here. That's all we have for you in this edition of Public Forum. Thanks a lot for watching us. Namaskar.